Good morning. I'm here with Richard Corcoran, the president of New College. Graciously gave us some time on this Tuesday morning, and he and I had a talk last week. I'm Ben Brown. I'm the chair of the New College Alumni Association, and we both thought that it would be good to have a conversation that we could share with the community and share views and hear directly from Richard about some of the details of what's going on campus that alumni don't know about. But before we do that, I wanted to invite Richard to talk about his background and his career in public service and how he became interested in education, and particularly any places along the journey where New College came up, if you'd just to introduce yourself a little bit.
Yeah, I'll try not to go too long, Ben. People always ask what was the focus of education. Most of it started with my parents. Both my parents were older and long since passed, but both also fought in World War II and lived through the Great Depression. So my mom was she was British, and she worked in the Women's Auxiliary Force. My dad was in the U.S. Army Air Force. And as he would say, he chased Rommel through North Africa. But neither one had a formal education. They had a great K-12 education, probably second to none, but they didn't have a formal education. And so education was just a big thing because they didn't have that opportunity. My dad was orphaned when he was about 2 years old. My mom lived in boarding houses because her parents, during the Great Depression, had to go to India to work and manage a tea plantation. And so she was actually raised in England with, adoptive families and boarding schools. So they were very, very focused on family and very focused on the value of an education and knowing what it is that you should believe. Having that philosophy, because they were so moved by the philosophies, the poor philosophies, the pernicious philosophies of others. And so that was something that we grew up on. So of the 5 children my parents had, 3 of us, I think, are attorneys. All of us have college degrees. So they did a really kind of emphasis on education. Me personally, after I went to undergrad, I was a little bit of a, as my mom would say, a cad. And I don't mean that as much in the cad's probably the wrong word. I'd say I was a little bit of a partier.
Uh-huh.
And so I went to University of Florida. I was there for 5 semesters, I think, and I got 6 credits and had a 0.46 GPA before they kicked me out. And so then my dad was looking around, and he actually appointed me to New College. And so I actually applied to New College. I came to this building and had an interview with a professor. I wish I could remember who it was. But rightfully so, I didn't get in. I mean, my GPA was 0.46. So, but I was very fascinated with New College even back then. And moving forward, got my undergraduate degree, got my law degree, and then started practicing law. All through that process, because of my undergraduate career, I always said I need to, you either got it because you have a great job because you had this great resume, or because you knew people. And so I started interacting with anyone I could know that was influential, which was mostly politics, and that's helped me get a job right out of college. And then I kind of rose through the ranks. I was chief of staff in the short version for Marco Rubio. I did all kinds. I was a general counsel, special counsel, chief of staff. Then I ran for office myself and became speaker, was chosen to be speaker. And then after that, Governor DeSantis won his primary and chose me to be commissioner of education, because most of my focus when I was in the legislature was on education. And then after that, I went back into private practice for about a year, and then got this opportunity at New College. That's the expedited version on the last 25 years.
One thing that people were asking me is, people were saying, okay, State College of Florida, how does that fit into, that's not part of the state university system that the Board of Governors manages? I said, no, it's not. And maybe you could talk a little bit about what is the bailiwick of Commissioner of Education, because I think a lot of people don't really get the structure in Florida.
Yeah, it's really, for the Commissioner of Education, it's everything but the 12 universities. So it's basically birth, pre-K, federal programs and early learning, and all the way through our community college/college state colleges. So there's 28 state colleges. So you basically go from pre-K to the 28 state colleges in the K-12 underneath the Commissioner of Education.
Got it. Were there any times in your legislative career when New College came up?
They did. So again, going back to my parents, they were voracious readers. Thankfully, I grew up in the 70s, so there was, we had 3 channels, and every now and then when we moved to Florida, there was a channel called Channel 44 that you could get. But most of the time we had just 3 channels until I was in high school. Is when cable really became a thing, and you could get, and even then it became a thing, but you had to wait for it to come to your neighborhood. During that time, we were just big readers, and my parents always stressed the value of liberal arts. So I think all 5 of my siblings, except maybe one, we all have degrees in the liberal arts, and obviously 3 of us went on to law school. And in that context, I get to be elected, become speaker, and when I'm speaker, there's, I think we had 11 universities. No, we had 12 by the time I was there, Polytech being the last. And there was New College, and nobody really knew of New College. I knew because I not only had applied, but I was a huge fan of the liberal arts. And there was this whole move that I would go to the Board of Governors as a speaker-elect or speaker and talk about this move. One of the metrics that they created was that you had to have 65%. It wasn't even 65, I think it was 50, and then they raised it to 65% of your graduates have a STEM degree. And I was saying, I'm not against STEM, and there's definitely a need. Right. I mean, you can see the dearth of engineers we're producing, et cetera. But to do it to the sacrifice of the liberal arts is being an ostrich. I mean, that is just foolishness. And I would say that to them over and over. And so during my time as speaker, New College came. It would have been President O'Shea, and they wanted upwards of $10 million for faculty hiring. And so during my speakership, I actually funded, I can still remember who your lobbyist was at the time, because he was just shocked that anybody would give New College, money. And it wasn't really because I knew New College. I hadn't really been on the campus. I think we had a redistricting hearing here in 2012 that I came down, and it was in Sudikoff. And I had just gotten beat up by a horse, and so I could barely sit down, getting chucked by a horse. So I was kind of out of it. But that was the last time I was physically on New College campus till I came back in February of 23. But yeah, so I think I gave you guys, and the way it works is you have to get the Senate to agree to it, and the governor has to not veto it. But when you're a presiding officer elect, you have a decent level of clout, and so especially when it's an appropriation, getting the other side to agree. Normally they'll say to you, okay, we'll give you the $10 million for New College, but you got to give us $10 million for this water project or whatever it might be. And so you can get the legislature to work, and then you have to get past the governor's veto. But that happened when I was a speaker of the House, and we put in the money for a New College.
Yeah, I think you're right about how hard the lobbyist saw his job as being back then. It was a difficult time for the college, and I mean, I'm proud of the students for doing very well during that time with limited resources, and for the faculty, but it was certainly like that, and you may not even know how much you helped New College by doing that. It's funny, I think one thing you have in common with a lot of other New College people is the love of reading and having read a lot as a youth. And I did that too. And like you, I kind of had a cheat code. And I grew up in the 90s and the aughts, but I just had wise parents, and they just said, the best way to handle this is just not to have a television. Just don't have it in the home. And so it wasn't until I was in the later grades of middle school that my father said, if you get good grades, you can build your own computer. I'll get you the parts, and you have to build it, which is also kind of a New College mindset, although he didn't know what New College was at the time. And then I was able to, watch, television episodes and things on the computer. But it's really common for people to kind of be voracious readers, and they read beyond what they're assigned when they're in high school. That's kind of a hallmark of a New College person, I think. They do some extra independent reading on the side. I think one thing we share, and we'll get into the academic program and everything that's going on currently, but we're both interested in the legal profession, and I've definitely have some sort of reflections on it, and I do have the feeling, though I haven't looked at official statistics, that we've produced a lot of law graduates who've had pretty remarkable careers. And have you I have some thoughts about like, supporting students who have, they don't know for sure necessarily, but they're thinking about maybe doing a legal career. And there's certainly people who go into legal careers and it's not the right thing for them. And you have to like guard against that too. But in some ways, if you do it right at the undergraduate level, they can see clearly what the career is and decide if it's right for them. But maybe have you encountered any pre-law students, or have you given any thought to like, sort of programs that might, kind of, this is kind of an open-ended question, but you have had a substantial legal career. I mean, I've heard you talk about some of your work as a trial lawyer and stuff. I'm just kind of curious.
Yeah, so what we did in the last year is we've hired 2 new faculty. In fact, even one of our humanities professors in the anthropology is a lawyer too, an interesting individual. But we hired 2 lawyers, PhDs. Both are PhDs. One was at Georgetown Law Center. One was University of Chicago. And they're helping build out our pre-law program and taking it to another level. And I always say, I don't know if this is even accurate, you might argue with it, Ben, but I kind of view law, my 2 favorite, obviously I did them, but I love the liberal arts. And then I think once you get done with that liberal arts degree, the degree after, which I think is a PhD of the liberal arts in a sense, or a master's of the liberal arts, where you just take another level of critical thinking, thinking outside the box, having just tons of information that you got to synthesize through and make good decisions and strategies, is a law degree. My oldest is in her 2nd year of law school, and I told her, even if you never practice, I think it's an amazing degree. And if you go to Wall Street, you tell people you're a lawyer. You might not practice, but you tell people you're a lawyer. They're very interested in you because they know you have a way of thinking. And you marry that with an undergraduate degree in liberal arts, it's a special way of thinking. And I've encouraged, the next one child I have is still in undergrad, finished in a year, senior year. But I've encouraged all of them to get their law degree. And maybe they have to take a year off in between. It could be a lot just to go 7 years straight through. I worked in between my undergrad and law degree. I think it's a special degree, and it opens up so many doors. I don't know, you've probably been in a room. I remember being in the legislature, and I'd sit there as a staffer, and you'd have this guy who made $19 million starting a startup company, brilliant guy, but he wasn't a lawyer, and you're sitting in the room, and you're going through some legislation that he's working on. And I don't know how many times, I wish I could have a nickel for every time someone said, you probably know this better than I do because you're a lawyer. Yeah. You just hear it over and over and over. And in your head, it's like a code. We never say we don't because we want to take care of the legal profession and continue the charade. But in your head, you're thinking, I have no idea what this says. You know what I mean? But it's a special degree, and it's a respected degree. And you got, to your point, I've done the bulk of my practice that I've done with my wife. Where we, most successful was in what we euphemistically call consumer law, but basically tort law. Yeah. But I always felt it's all the things that I care about. It's fun when you are fighting for those least capable of fighting for themselves. And I think in tort law, you're always. I remember taking this very poor, he bought himself a truck, a dump truck, and he would haul brick and sand and what have you to these different places. And it's all he did. He, took out a loan to buy the dump truck. He lived in a very small house with his wife and children. And because of the premises, it was a premises liability case. And because of the neglect of this big corporate manufacturer, he basically contracted a serious injury that became a serious disease, and it was pretty much the beginning of the end for him. Yeah. But he couldn't even get anybody to take his case, initially. It sounded like assumption of risk and all these different things. But it's fun when you represent those people and you can get a good result. It's the same in education. Why do I care most about education? It's the greatest equalizer in our country. If you want to take somebody, everyone deserves that world-class education. And if everyone's afforded that world-class education, society gets better. Not just in tax revenues, not just in the wisdom of protecting the environment or whatever it might be. being, good citizens, all of those things. You're so much more capable of making the world a better place when you have that world-class education, which is why Frederick Douglass always says to deny somebody that kind of an education is a crime against humanity. I think it's one of the great quotes.
Yeah, I think, you said a lot, and one reason I think we both share a strong interest in law is we have an interest in public affairs and public policy and things like that, and you've made a really impressive career out of it. I just kind of read the newspaper and go to municipal meetings and stuff, but I do my full-time legal work, but it's made me a better citizen. I can definitely say that, and I'm grateful, I think, for the approach that New College gave me to law school, because I went straight through, which was a bad idea, which I regret. I did poorly my first semester because I went straight through. So just for any students listening out there, think hard about that decision. I think I wound up in law school with a more active kind of confrontational mind, and I think that came from New College. And the legal profession, like law school, it's a very prescribed curriculum, and you kind of march through it. You do get some choice in your later 2 years, but when you get out into the profession, I think you really do rely on New College sorts of values, because it's you have to be very generative, and you're in situation. If you're like a litigator, you're in situations of conflict all the time, and that I think requires a great deal. It requires like a self-propulsion. You can't just react, and this is a good entree into New College's academic program, and not just in relation to legal careers, but many kinds of careers. Because before I wax poetic about how much I love the experience myself, I'll ask you. I felt when I had talked with you last week for a while, and I thought when you were in the legislature, you started to gain, a more in-depth understanding of the college, and you certainly identified it correctly as a liberal arts college, and you have been consistent since you arrived about talking about its distinctive program that it's known for. But I also felt that over your time as president, that feelings about the program have deepened and become more complex. And I just wanted to invite you to talk about your reaction to the program. And if you get me talking about it, I'll probably continue for a while, because I really love it. But
I will say the biggest game changer for me since being here, knowing New College on the periphery, knowing, circumstances, reading online, all these different things. The single biggest factor of wow is the whole model of education. And to the point that I would say, Ben, that there's so many great things about New College. Its history, its buildings, its faculty, its students, all of those great things. The one thing that everybody should know, whether it's the state legislators, whether it's the governor, whether it's parents who come on preview day, that I think separates us from all other schools, and the history of doing it just amazingly well, is the educational, the mode of education. And when you start at preview day, so when we have previews, Dr. Rancourt opens and he moderates, talks about admissions, then I talk. And now our new provost, David Rohrbacher, who's been here for 25 years, talks. And all three of us talk about the educational system. Dr. Rohrbacher goes into depth in it and takes Q&A as a professor and as a faculty advisor. But I literally say to parents that the single most important thing you ought to know, your takeaway, is how we do things here at New College. And you might have heard how we don't have grades. And I talk about grade inflation. I think 85% or 80 or 85% of Harvard students get A's. This is not real. But what we do, we push you harder. We actually force you to fail. We want you to learn grit and adversity and recognize that's a doorway to greatness and that you're never down. Learn those negotiation skills. I mean, it's just so many things that are built in. Be an independent thinker and say, I want to take a course and I think it should look like this, and negotiate that course out and then have that course. It's absolutely the way we should educate today, and it's what makes us distinct from literally 99% of all universities. There's still some out there, Reed, Evergreen. But we always say, let's advertise that. Let that be, yes, we're inexpensive. Yes, we are in a beautiful historical facility. But what separates us is how we educate you. And we educate you, one of the lines that we say is, we don't educate you for your first job, we educate you for your last job. Especially in an AI world, when you're going to have all these changing things, when you've been taught that mode of education and the adversity and the grit and the innovative, forcing you to be innovative about your educational career, it's a game changer. And so we really do. In fact, our CEO office, where we help get students jobs, they just posted the 25 things employers are looking for. 20 of the 25, and I'm not even joking, Ben, are those skills that you learn through our academic model. It's that ingrained into what not only employers want or the world wants, but what makes you just so much more prepared for all the adversity you're certainly going to face in life.
Yeah, one thing I attached to when you were talking is you said the 99%, and I actually think that's a literal statement of like how, in other words, 99% of programs don't do what we do in terms of having narrative evaluations and the other features of a student-driven education where students are very self-reliant. And I mean, that's one thing that I continue to find remarkable about the whole higher education scene in America, because I certainly, I applied and went to New College because of it was like that, and I was really attracted to it, and I really it was as advertised. I really loved it, and I think I definitely want to talk more about how it serves the New College alum in the remainder of their life, and because I think it does have a lasting impact on how you approach and learn about new things. But one of the things that I find strangest about it is just how rare it is, and I don't actually understand that. It doesn't seem intuitive to me that there should be, these kinds of innovations should be so rarely implemented anywhere. But I think that helps explain kind of for students who don't know, like the alumni community is almost insanely attached to the college and has really intense feelings about it, and this, and is, watching every little change that occurs with huge interest and is often very sensitive to the change. And, but it's because we see it, I think, is we really value it, and we also see how rare it is. And anyway, that was just, something I agree with you about that. I guess the message I was thinking, like, how do you encapsulate such a unique program? And I think, how do you introduce it to other people? This is like a struggle I have in life, because people, often don't know what New College is, and you have to explain it to them. And I think there are a lot of strong programs in the country, like really strong, like MIT, for example, where it's still a kind of you pay for your ticket and you take your ride mentality, and you kind of march through a prescribed curriculum and a progression of things. And the New College student in their first year is confronted with an independent study project, and they're not told what it's going to be. People will help you brainstorm if you want. They'll maybe help you come up with some ideas, but you have to come up with the idea. And I actually think that's kind of maybe how I would encapsulate it, that it forces you to be not just react to what's in front of you, but to generate things. I do want to go through, I think one of the reasons it's hard to explain is there's this constellation of features, and they all kind of have a unified underlying philosophy. But you mentioned narrative evaluations. I would mention ISPs. I would mention the thesis, the opportunity tutorials. And could you talk a little bit about how the program has developed under your leadership, and how how we're sort of what we're doing to support that today?
Yeah. So one of the professors, been around for 25 years, said to me, if you would have, after all of the changes and everything that's being written, if you would have said to me that 2 years later we'll still have our entire academic model, I would have said there's just no chance. But it's not just me. It's new faculty that come in. They're initially, wow, wait a second, no grades. This sounds like it's, and some, for whatever reason, it gets associated with, I think it's the opposite in many ways, but it gets associated with like political liberal, like that liberal sense. Or progressive or whatever, because it's different. It's unorthodox, but it's not. It's really, the way the world really raises up children is much more of a new college model to give them the license to succeed and fail, give them narrative evaluations their whole lives. That's, it's kind of how we do it. And it pushes you further, and it makes you want to work harder than the other models. And the other model is collapsing under the weight of itself in the sense that there just really is massive, not a little bit, but massive grade inflation. And so all that being the case, I think, so I say this, he gets mad when I say it, but my son goes here, and over the summer he wanted to, this is just the beauty of new colleges. In a little anecdote, he wants to start a business where he goes out on the water and he catches these minnows and he sells them to the bait shops and he gets this much, whatever. So, I said to him, Jack, you're at New College. This is the wonderful thing in New College. Go to your economics professor, go to your faculty advisor, walk through and create, basically an ISP for January and start a business. You have to build out a business, see what they put. They're going to make you, actually earn it. But can you imagine that you graduate and you say, well, I was an undergraduate, I started a business. And it doesn't, if as an employer, if you said that to me, whether you succeeded or failed, first I'd ask a bunch of follow-up questions because I'm fascinated that while you're an undergrad, you started a business. And then I find out you failed miserably, but you're going to learn tremendously from that failure. And so, but that's the beauty of New College. You can do that as an undergrad, get credit for it. You could build out that course with the consultation of your faculty advisor and some other faculty, build out the course. It's just an amazing way to educate. And you marry that with the great conversations of time, I think you end up with a product where people are going to be thoroughly impressed. There becomes that rhetoric, like new college graduates, as it has for years and years. They're just different. They think differently. They work differently. And that's, I think that helps. I always say three things that we try to do in the last 2 years. We got to grow money. The biggest problem New College has had over the last 64-year history was money. We got to solve that problem.
Absolutely.
Secondarily, we got to grow students. The pressure on us as a public institution to show a return on investment is to grow. Part of that return on investment is to grow students. But the third is to, grow the prestige again. It has taken a hit over the last 15, 20 years, and we need to grow that prestige. And if you grow, money and you grow students and you grow great programs and great faculty, you're going to get that prestige. And so I think all of that is happening. But in that bucket, the more we could do. I think, I joked with some of our faculty, I think about advertising campaigns, and I was saying we should just get billboards up and down 75, 95, and 19, and I would do, creative billboards, and it basically shows like one shows the Mona Lisa, the next one shows the Statue of David, the next one shows the Sistine Chapel, whatever, these great pieces of works of art, and then just say the Mona Lisa, and next to it would say C+. And then, the Statue of David, B, A-, whatever. But I would just do them and then say some things are too great and too wonderful to be graded. The human mind and the human, individual getting educated, it's much more than a letter grade. I mean, let's not be silly. And then say at New College, we don't do, but get that model out there. It's amazing, Ben, when you come to a preview and the parents are sitting there. And if I were a parent that came to a preview before coming here as president, interim president, I would have been sitting in the same thing saying, okay, I came here because this is one of the schools that my son or daughter applied to, but this whole thing seems crazy, not grading, it's nothing, nobody's used to it. And then when I sit there and I listen to the Rohrbachers and the Rancourts talk about the grading model and why it is, I would have walked out of that room, which we see, you just see the lights going off in parents. where this makes perfect sense why they grade like this, why they have a thesis, why they have ISP, why they have tutorials. This is really amazing. And they walk out and they come in huge skeptics, they leave huge fans. And that's something that we should put front and center as we try to grow that prestige, is this is our model and it's the best in the world.
I think there's like something of a paradox in new college education, because we really do teach and deeply believe and teach at a deep level this idea of self-reliance, taking initiative on your own. I mean, I do think that's a really powerful message for students and prospective students and parents, that there's a difference between the signifier and then the thing signified. And at best, a letter grade is a signifier of what you're able to do and what you've accomplished. And as I think you very interestingly point out, it might not be that accurate or good of a signifier these days. But we've always emphasized that what you can actually do is what matters. And it doesn't actually matter how someone else has judged you if you know what you can do. And it also doesn't matter what you regurgitated on an exam one time if you don't leave the school with that. And that to me has been a big part of New College. So it almost reminds me of the movie Good Will Hunting, where Will is in an argument in a bar, and he's arguing with a Harvard guy who seems smart, but it turns out is kind of superficial, and Will's knowledge is much deeper. And Will mocks him and makes fun of him as an adolescent boy might, and says, I learned everything you did for $1.50 in late fees at the public library. Now, this is a paradox I wanted to get to, because New College actually doesn't take that approach. We actually provide rich resources for our students. And I mean, we have gotten through some under-resourced times, and I think that our philosophy has helped us be resilient in those times. But when I was a student, David Rohrbacher was teaching. He was excellent, really passionate scholar and very passionate about teaching too. And a lot of the faculty were like that. And I just, there's kind of, we do have a paradox in which we really instill and teach self-reliance, initiative, but we also have robust courses and accomplished scholars on campus. And maybe I don't know if this is a good transition, but I thought of it as maybe an entree into the Logos and Techne idea, because I do think that's something worth extrapolating for alumni and others who might be watching.
Yeah, really, the short version of how we kind of get to that point was, over the years, when I'm in the legislature, what have you, and there's the University of Florida's, there's FSU's, there's UCF's, USF's, these big universities, and most of your colleagues had graduated from one of those institutions. I ultimately graduated from a small liberal arts school, and you try to explain the liberal arts to them, and it's like this foggy haze of, it sounds good, but it sounds I'm trying to think of the right word, fruity. It sounds like pie in the sky, And so I think trying to bridge that gap with, the world on the value of the liberal arts is essential. And we still have a ways to go, but I do think that's and that's why in all of our promotional materials that we've done one is, what are the liberal arts? The booklets we hand out. What is the liberal arts? Why does the liberal arts still matter? Why New College is, the premier school in the liberal arts? But we have to sell that concept constantly with the world. But when people grasp it, they get married to it really fast, because it produces, and we try to tell anecdotes all the time about great people. I don't care if you name, I always say, it's a little bit of an extravagant statement, but most of the great movements of time that you can think of in the modern era, especially in our country, were derived from people with liberal arts backgrounds. I don't care if it's the founding fathers to Martin Luther King to you name them. These are folks who all were educated in the liberal arts. Martin Luther King still to this day credits his liberal arts background in reading about Gandhi and his passive resistance on being the whole formulation of his civil rights movement and the way he undertook it, which was obviously tremendously successful. But you have to constantly tell those anecdotes and tell that story so people can understand what that means.
To kind of reference Steve Jobs, as you've done and as the college has done, do you think it's fair to say that there are a lot of institutions in the country that might do technical stuff well, but they're kind of missing the humanities as an ingredient?
Yeah, in fact, I didn't even answer your question, Ben. I apologize. I got off on my side. But that progression of the liberal arts, but when you're having those conversations, you lose people, in that haze. I can just see it in their eyes, like, okay, sounds good, but I'm not there. I'd rather have an engineer. Or
they see the paintings in the Pompeii room, and they say, okay, their eyes glaze over.
Exactly. And so what happened was just starting to growing up with Steve Jobs and then reading about Steve Jobs, and then he would do all these videos and conversations. Well, he was a passionate liberal arts guy. Went to Reed College, didn't finish, but he went to Reed College. That's where he credits the Helvetica font, all these great things. But he became the first $1 trillion market cap company. He was the first giant, and it's tech. It's all tech. It's computers and iPhones and all of this stuff. And so what happened was, when I could, steal from Steve Jobs and say, why was he more successful than Bill Gates and Steve Ballmer and Oracle and all these different guys, Andreessen, and he would say it's because that intersection, we're not just a tech company, all those other guys are, and that leads to, a very isolated place. Not to say it's not successful, but you marry that with the liberal arts, and that intersection is what makes your heart sing. And we even show that video at all of our previews. We start with Steve Jobs because if you're a parent or you're a skeptic and you're thinking, I'd rather my kid go to USF or UF, and I'm not knocking them, but I just think what we do is much more special. And you start with Steve Jobs, or you take quotes from an NVIDIA or a Tesla, Elon Musk's quotes, and they hear them and they're like, wait a second, there must be something to these liberal arts. I want to know more. And so that's really what we got to and we need to be innovative. When you have AI, the biggest thing they're attacking is the STEM courses. They're the ones most in jeopardy, not the liberal arts. I always joke, if you play sports and you watch golf and it'll say it's a 27-foot putt and they have an 8% chance, or if it's the 4th and goal. I was just watching football last night, 4th and 2, they have the AI says go for it, and here's why. But you don't know is the head coach knows that the center is afraid of the nose tackle, or that the running back thinks he just tweaked his hamstring, or all these different things that you have to do in real time. And be that critical thinker with all that data. Yes, it can spit out from data, but it doesn't tell you the whole picture, and that's what the liberal arts does. And so the whole techne and logos was to say, if you are a humanities major, you should be, if we want to get a well-rounded student, exposed to some degree of technology. And if you're a STEM student, you should absolutely be exposed to the humanities, and that's what we've been working on putting together, and it's pretty special. It's been a long project. I don't think we're all going to 100% agree, but we've gotten to a really good place, and now the beauty is we can tweak it. We can take a course out, add a course in at any point in time, and just the core. We're just talking about a 10-course core. The school always had, since I was here, a 10-course core. It was chart your course. So we didn't change the numbers. We just changed the messaging and the purpose behind it and made it a little bit more, I think, broadly impressive to the outside world, and I think it's also going to be a better result for the student. Yeah,
no, I mean, it's a wonderful way to communicate the value of what we do and to students and help and everyone who's watching and help people realize it as they go through. Well, I know we only budgeted so much time for this, and it's probably not surprising to viewers that a lot of our alumni are good business analysts and like to ask business questions, and can actually sometimes be quite challenging to college presidents. Not just you, your predecessors as well. So I've consumed and appreciated the business plan that was presented to the Board of Governors, and I just wanted to invite you to talk about it, how you're positioning the college, and issues like marketing the program and generating enrollment, and you know,
Yeah, it's been a process. But again, you would just hear all kinds of stuff. So, we added sports, and there'd be like this furor about how do you add sports, and people just don't even realize. I think a lot of the alumni didn't realize where did I get that idea from? I got it from a 2016 strategic plan written by New College. That was where that idea generated from. And then when we did it, it was only a matter of months, maybe a year later. I don't care if it was Chronicle of Higher Ed that criticized us for it, Inside Higher Ed criticized us for it. Then they all wrote articles about how sports are saving the liberal arts, a driver in saving the liberal arts. But that was, and again, not my original thought. I wish I could say it was, but it was really a New College original thought. And then there would be discussion about, okay, how many students should be, is it 30, is it 35, is it too many athletes?
You're talking percentages there.
Yeah, percentages, correct.
Yeah.
And so then I went and looked at the top 43 liberal arts schools that I could find, and looked at their percentage. Did they have sports, and what was their percentage? Basically the basic number is 35%. I don't care if you take any of these great schools, Amherst, Williams, it doesn't matter. And so, but we would get, 35% is too high. I just think there's a lot. Change brings about a lot of concern and consternation and worry. But what we try to do, everything is as methodically and as fact-driven as possible. We look at all those 43 schools. We look at this other state university systems and how do we become the best liberal arts school. And then we've hired liberal arts background people who worked at McKinsey, started their own shop. They've been doing it and building out the growth if you look at the number of students who want to go to liberal arts schools and the number of liberal arts schools that are great in that area, it's going to be dominated by the South over the next 20 years. So we're perfectly well positioned. The Northeast has basically 60% of the schools, and they'll have like 10% or 15% of the students. We're going to have 60% of the students and only 10% of the schools.
Yeah.
So we're perfectly poised to just get the most amazing students to come to us over the next 20 years if we position ourselves right. And so we're doing all of this based on metrics and data. And we're even targeting, okay, we know that Ben Brown High School has 14 students who have, over 27, over a 1280. How do we go grab 2 of those? And then we're building out our whole admissions department to go to those schools, make the pitch. And again, the pitch is the value of liberal arts. The pitch is our academic model. And then bring those students here. So I think we're well on the way to having great success. But it's this whole data-driven, talking to the experts, talking to people who aren't just experts. We even talk to the critics of the liberal arts, but we talk to all of them, but principally people who are passionate about the liberal arts, who've benefited, their lives have benefited from that background, and having them help us is going to be key.
I know we're about out of time, but could you talk a little bit about campus planning? And I think you have a sense of the issues alumni are asking about with that, and I just wanted to give you the chance.
The 2 biggest issues, sorry to interrupt, Ben, but the 2 biggest issues I think are the Bayfront, and by the Bayfront it's the Uplands neighborhood. And so we put a field out there, and that's the only thing that is ultimately will be in the master plan. I've met with the Uplands neighbors, and they say, well, we see some of these big buildings and they don't have a place yet. It's because we have to go through the master plan process. But where we have suggested they go is ultimately would be where we would like them to go in the master plan process. But the Uplands waterfront, what you see is what you get in the new master plan, assuming the trustees approve it. But I think everyone would like to preserve it. In fact, not only is it what you see, what you get, it had a creek that was completely overgrown. You couldn't see it. There was no water flowing through it. We've cleaned out all the invasives out of the creek. Now water's flowing through it. Ducks are back. We've cleaned out all the invasives that were squashing and pushing the mangroves into the bay. And now you're seeing those mangroves come back up. And now we're looking to plant some additional mangroves because it helps with mitigation. Ultimately, one of our great alumni and John O'Miller has told me about, ultimately there was a plan to have a walkway from Caples all the way to Powell Crosley. So we would entertain that. We have a request at the federal government for millions of dollars to try to continue our boardwalk and walkway down behind the mangroves. But it would be a place where you could literally leave one of these neighborhoods and walk for a mile all through the beautiful campuses.
Yeah, and I did that a little bit the other day. I mean, the fences were down, and I was able to walk into the Uplands area, and I walked there's on the portion owned by USF, as you were pointing out to me, there's a paved kind of bicycle walking trail, and I walked over to the USF campus, and it's just, the construction fences are down now. That's news I wanted to share with the community.
Yeah, we're getting there.
They don't stay up forever.
And then the other big one, Ben, is the pay buildings. And we had we partnered with Architecture Sarasota. We had 43, I think, companies bid to be the 3 finalists. Architecture Sarasota chose the 3 finalists, a national firm, local firm. And then we had the unveiling at Sainer of their 3 models. The one who won was a local Sarasota architect, Sweet Sparkman. And so all the pays are staying. They have these brand new drawings. They're all on the internet if you want to see it, but all 3 of the pays. The baseball field, which you might have seen, we just got $1 million to start the baseball field where the old car museum was. The actual goal, we haven't gotten the drawings and we got to go through the master plan process, but the actual goal would be to have the baseball field ultimately shift up a little bit so that the left field wall would be the pay, and we would call it the pay monster, kind of like Fenway Park has the green monster. We would have the pay monster as a part of the outfield. You have that out in San Diego too. They have one of the historical buildings right in the outfield. But it makes it beautiful. It makes a great spot to watch games, and it forever preserves that historical aspect. So yeah, we're gonna revitalize the pays, save the pays, and make them hopefully a focal point for the community. So maybe get some retail shops in there. Yeah. And then people could say, okay, I'm going to go to the Oslo Theater. I'm going to go to some event, but I'm going to go grab dinner or whatever, or lunch at the Pay complex, and then go over to the theater. So hopefully, all that costs money. So again, we got to grow the money and keep raising the money, but that's going very well. Yeah,
I know we're just squeezing this in at the end here, but that is something I really wanted to. I'm glad you addressed it, because I think a lot of alumni didn't realize that they in fact had a college president who saw the historic value of those buildings and, was looking, trying hard to preserve them, and still is. And that was something that you impressed on me when we met last week. There's more to talk about. There's a good deal more. We'll
do it regularly. We'll have a quarterly update with Ben Brown.
I know you have a whole day plan. Yeah. So I just want to thank you for doing this. It means a lot to me. I hope that we can get alumni and other people interested in the college to tune in, and I just wanted to thank you for taking the time. I'm really glad we were able to have this dialogue, and
I appreciate you doing what you do, Ben, and to the other alumni, to whoever ends up watching this, and to you, obviously, we need our alumni. We need you. We want you, and I think it's going to be a key component to the long-term prestigious success of the school. And so be glad to have our quarterly updates. And I try to keep an open door. I see a lot of alumni who are in the area from time to time. But I have pretty much an open door policy, and I'll be glad to meet with anybody and walk through all the things that we're doing and try to assuage any of their concerns.
And the alumni want to be here, and we want to be here especially for the students. And I mean, that's like even as we're working to build more formal structures for career services and networking and things, I just want the students to know they can always contact me if they want to make connections with the alumni community. If you learn about a certain type of graduate program, learn about a certain type of career, that's, we're really happy to have a seat at the table in the college, and, because those students are future alumni. So thank you for doing this, Richard.
I appreciate it, Ben. Thanks.